September marks the beginning of our new church year, and it is our normal pattern in September to take a few weeks to visit our vision as a church. And one of the reasons we do that is it's a very good start in the church year. If you are new to Redeemer, then it gives you an opportunity just to get a flavour for our vision, to hear a bit more of what we're about as a church. And if you're part of Redeemer, it gives a chance to just to refocus on a particular part of what we stand for as a church. And here is how we talk about our vision. Redeemer exists for the glory of God, through the spread of the gospel, to see our city and beyond transformed by Jesus. That's our heart. That's what we long for in everything we do as a church. And we want to do that through three key ambitions. We want to grow, we want to plant, and we want to impact. So we're committed and passionate about the church. Not just our church, not just this church, but all churches. And we long to see healthy churches thrive. Not only existing churches, but also new churches planted in Leeds and Yorkshire and beyond. So we have, from the beginning, had a desire to see churches planted within our city and beyond. And churches that in turn have an impact. This is a deeply broken world that we live in. And we want to be a church that reflects God's heart by working to impact brokenness. To be used by God to see restoration of people, restoration of communities, in systems and structures, to be a force for good in the world. So we want to plant churches that impact the communities around them. But this week, I want to begin with the source of all of this. And I want to look at what it means for us to grow. Now, when we talk about growth in churches, that can and that should mean lots of different things. It could mean growth in size, it could mean growth in depth, it could mean growth in diversity, growth in a whole different array of things. But the key to it all, this is what I want to argue today, is it means, above everything else, growth in Jesus. That's what it means. That's the driving force behind everything else. That is the driving force behind our entire vision. Without that, we can look like we're growing as a church. We can get a lot bigger as a church. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to feel the growing pains that we've just started to experience here on a Sunday. You can look impressive as a church, but ultimately, those marks can still shield and hide an unhealthy church. And over the next 3 weeks, our focus on growth in Jesus is going to take kind of a few different forms. Next week, Tom is going to share how we want growth in Jesus to inform mission, how we think about sharing the good news of Jesus. The week after, Alex is going to share how we want to keep growing in planting churches. The church belongs to Jesus, and therefore the life of Jesus flows through his church. He loves the church. So we're going to think about what growth in planting churches looks like. And as we do that, we're going to draw in other elements of our vision. And look, this isn't just about churches either. This is actually about what it means to flourish as a human being. It's about what it means to live the kind of life that I think all of us want. Because in the passage that Alex read for us, that we'll focus on this afternoon in the Gospel of John, chapter 15, Jesus uses a powerful image to describe growth. He describes growth as bearing fruit. That's what he says. He's talking about something every one of us desire. Now, we may not use that language. My guess is probably most of us don't. But we want lives that bear fruit. Let me put it in a slightly different way. We want lives that count for something. We want lives that bring us and those around us satisfaction and joy. It's what we want. A life where what we do seems to matter, seems to last. And that is exactly what Jesus promises anyone who follows after him. Jesus promises a fruitful kind of life. So can I come up with 3 things this afternoon with us? Where we get the fruit, where it comes from, what the fruit looks like, and how we can get on with it. Okay, what fruit it is, where it comes from rather, what the fruit looks like, and how we can get it. Here's the first thing then. Where does this fruit come from? By the way, I've preached for a few weeks. Brokenness. this is now really wobbly, and I can't get this mic to, it just keeps wobbling around. I don't know what I've been doing with these things. A massive head. That must be what it is. My head is actually enormous, and so it's normally set up for me. I feel like it's amplifying my eyeball. Here anyway is the basic picture, where this fruit comes from. A full life, a fruitful life comes from connection to Jesus. Look at verse 4. This is wonderful. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. It is such a lovely, simple, clear picture. The image is a vine producing fruit. It's simply this, it is that you do not get grapes, fruit, unless the branch is living, drawing its life and its goodness from the vine. The branch has to be connected, otherwise no fruit is produced. Jesus says the same principle applies spiritually. When a person is connected to him, when they are a Christian, his life flows into them, and the result is fruit. You become a fruitful person through connection with Jesus. Because as simple as it is, the language of Jesus is actually very stark here. He says you are either joined with him, you either share his life, or what? What exactly? Less life. A life that's not quite as preferable, not quite as good. No, here's what he says. The alternative is no life. Look at verse 6. Jesus says, if anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. Jesus is warning us. He's warning us, unless you really know him, unless you are connected with him, you cannot know true life. You'll miss out on his life. Now, you can do that very clearly outside of the church. In other words, knowing that you're not a Christian. But you know the surprise? It's a shock, actually. It can happen inside the church as well. Let me explain that. Here's how it happens outside the church. What I mean by that is you know you're not a Christian. You're clear that you do not follow Jesus. Maybe you're curious, maybe you're interested, but you know that's not you. Maybe it's you today. And perhaps as you hear the words of Jesus this afternoon, you say, well, hold on. I think my life looks okay. I don't see exactly what I'm missing when Jesus speaks in such sharp terms. I don't see the need for Jesus in order to live a life that has some kind of purpose and meaning. Well, look again. Jesus fills in a little more in verse 11. He says, these things I've spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. Or complete is another way to phrase that. Jesus never says a person can't know some purpose, some meaning, and some joy without him. This is what he says in this passage. What he says is, you can never have this full kind of joy without him. You can never know a lasting joy without him. See, here is the tragic thing that so many people discover. They discover you can succeed in nearly every single area of life, and you can still miss out on this kind of joy. You can have career, you can have a house, you can have lifestyle, you can have achievement, you can have a relationship, you can have a family you always dreamed of, and you can still miss out on the true source of life, on the fullness of joy that Jesus speaks of. You can still, says Jesus, be like a dead branch. But here is the more surprising truth. This can happen, and does happen, inside the church as well. You can spend time around the church, in the community of the church, and you can still be a lifeless branch. You can still not have and no connection with Jesus. A dead branch from a distance can look just like a living one. at least for a while. One of the houses that we used to rent, we had a wonderful neighbour, and he was incredibly proactive, and he'd been asking the landlord to cut some trees down that were kind of leaning over his hedge, leaning over his fence, and the landlord was taking their time, and we woke up one Saturday morning to a chainsaw, and he was doing it, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. Anyway, he kind of felled a few trees, and threw all of the branches over on our side as well. We had a great relationship. It was all good. And so we kind of moved all the branches out and cleared them all away. And then we left one massive branch. Still had loads of what looked like kind of green shoots all over it. And it was only as winter passed, and as the leaves kind of fell off, I said to Anne one day, I said, "Yeah, a massive log in the garden that we thought was a tree is dead. It was one of the ones he cut down. There's been no life in it this whole time. Time uncovered, there was no fruit." See, and what Jesus says here may in fact be a reference to Judas. Remember Judas? Judas as a branch appeared the same as all of the other disciples. You just couldn't have told the difference. Yet he had just sold Jesus over to death. Literally, had sold Jesus over to death. Here is the point. Don't think that coming and being a part of Redeemer or any church is the same as knowing Jesus. Because it's not. As having a living connection with Jesus. You need to know Jesus. You need to be personally connected, to know real life. Being around the church is not enough. And the only way you'll know that life is being by connected to Him and sharing with Him. See, that's where the fruit comes from. Here's the second thing though. What does it look like? What does this fruit look like? Again, very simple. It looks like the tree that produces it. Think about this. How do you know an apple tree? Unless you're an enthusiast, you know it because you see some apples. Yeah, now I know there's some of you who go on. It's not really way to tell. You do know that. Some of us can just kind of look from a distance and we know. But if you don't, the way you identify an apple tree is see an apple. That's one of those sneaky ones. The one I'm walking with my mum, the apple's on last. Actually, it's not really an apple. It's kind of a kumquat or some other thing that looks like an apple. But it's the same with a vine. How do you know a vine? You never need to have seen a vine in the world before. If you see a massive bunch of grapes growing off it, you're pretty certain that's a vine. You know it because of the fruit. The fruit looks like a tree. So think about that in relation to what Jesus says here. If we're connected with Jesus, and if His life flows through us, what will fruit look like? It will look the same as the vine that produces it. It will look like Jesus. Our lives will be characterized by the kind of fruit that characterized His life. This is so practical. You know, the test of whether someone is a Christian is if they produce this kind of fruit. It isn't some kind of mystical test. It isn't primarily about how you feel inside. Jesus is so clear. He says, if you follow me, you will love like me. Listen to verse 12. It's a wonderful verse. This is my command, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lays down his life for his friends. And then he returns to verse 17. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. Jesus says if you love Him, if you are loved by Him, you will love like Him. That's what He says. The fruit, the evidence will be how well you love others. It shows how well you know Him. And maybe you ask, well, why? Why love? Why not something else? Why not different? Something different? Why is loving others the market here? Well, the vine image is a rich one. It works in so many different ways. Let me show you just a couple. Here's one. It works because the vine has a rich biblical heritage. It has a rich background in the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, the vine was a supreme symbol of God's people. That was the image God frequently used to describe Israel, and it became a symbol, a powerful symbol for them. It's used on the temple porch, even on coins that were issued. But Israel never fully completed what God had called them to be. They were called to be a light to other nations, to bless others and show God's saving power to the ends of the earth. And that's why a vine was such a great image. God gave them life to produce fruit that blessed others, that pointed to His goodness. But they never fully did that. In fact, Psalm 80 describes how instead of being a fruitful vine, they became like a scorched and a withered vine burned by fire. Did you see how Jesus reframes the image in these verses? He is saying He is the true vine. At every point where Israel failed, He would succeed. And then in turn, He would call His followers to be joined to Him, the true vine, to do what? To do what God's vine was always meant to be. To produce fruit, to be a light to other nations, to bless others, to show God's saving power to the ends of the earth. And that's why it makes such sense for Jesus to link the picture of joining Him as the true vine to loving others. Christians follow Jesus. They love like Jesus as they share God's blessing with others. As they share the good news of Jesus with others. In Jesus, to be the vine God always intended, to produce fruit that blesses others. See, there's one rich element of the vine. Let me give you just one more. Why does a vine exist? Why does a vine exist? Well, a vine exists in order to bear fruit. A vine that doesn't bear fruit is no use. It misses its purpose for existence. That's what Jesus says in verse 6. And that's why fruitless branches get thrown away. A branch with no fruit makes no sense. Listen to how one writer describes it. They put it this way. The vine lives to give its lifeblood. Its flower is small, its fruit abundant, and when that fruit is mature and the vine has become for a moment glorious, the treasure of the grapes is torn down and the vine is cut right back to the stem. Do you hear that? Do you hear that? All of it builds why? For the fruit. So the fruit is produced. The fruit is passed on to others. It flows outward. And that's what Jesus says is like with His followers. And that's why it brings such glory to God to live in that way. Listen to verse 8. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. Now, in one sense, fruit is all of our life lived out for God. All of it includes everything. But the best way to see a fruitful life is a life that looks more and more like the life of Jesus. His life brought glory to God, His Father, perfectly. And His life, above everything else, was characterized by what? By love. Love. Glorious love. Love for His Father. Love for others. Love flowing in every act and deed and word. And the more we're connected with Him, the more His life of love flows in us. I know what some of you are thinking now. I thought you said this was a life of joy. But every message I've ever heard says that if I live to put others first, that will make me miserable. So how in the world does living sacrificially for other people bring a life of joy? Just remember that Jesus promises the opposite. Jesus promises a life that leads to, verse 11, fullness of joy. And actually, if you know and are familiar with the words of Jesus, he just appeals like this all the time. It's wonderful. He keeps doing it. He offers a deeper, more lasting, more satisfying joy, not a lesser one. So the vine is a perfect image for joy because the fruit of the vine in the Old Testament was always joyful. Well, nearly always anyway. Grapes that produce wine that God gave, says the Psalms, to gladden the hearts of men. Submitting to Jesus, let me tell you this, in the end, obedience to Jesus, in the end, always leads to more joy. There is a verse in 1 Peter, chapter 1, verse 8, that puts it this way: a joy inexpressible point where it just says, there's no words. There's no more words to describe the quality of this joy, the depth of this joy, the beauty of this joy, the completeness of this joy. Well, you know you're talking joy at another level altogether. But here's what Jesus says. It is in loving like him and loving him that kind of joy is produced. Now he says, here's one clue as to why. And there are so many that we could explore. He gives a clue. It's because his fruit is fruit that abides. And abide here is being used in the sense of lasting. So look at verse 16. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, that is last, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. This is fruit that lasts. See, if you place Jesus first, if you work for fruit that places him in the center, that makes you more like him, that allows you to share his love so others become disciples, you are investing in things that will last forever. Forever. Eternally valuable, eternally lasting. One of the reasons, you read psychologists, sociologists, they will tell you the same. One of the reasons so many people lack joy is because everything seems temporary. It seems like there is nothing that we do that really makes a difference. Nothing that really lasts. And so it means your contribution at work, how often does it seem pointless? The money that you work so hard for seems to just disappear. Maybe the kids you give yourself up for so many years, they grow up, they leave home, and they forget to call you. So what really lasts? It gives a feeling of futility to all we do. But working for this fruit is different. It's different. Because Jesus says it will last. Because it's a fruit he produces. It's his fruit. So you know how that reframes how you can look at life? It means in his hands the worst, the most pointless day you have ever had. The kind of day where it seems like you achieved nothing, where everything ended in futility in the office, in the home, in relationships, in yourself, is still a day that can be used by him to work towards fruit. To grow you in loving him and loving others. In fact, Christ-like fruit often grows fastest through circumstances like that. See, there's a part of the image I've not touched on yet. Here's my guess, some of you are hoping I wouldn't. But Jesus says the Father loves us so much, he won't leave us alone. He's so committed to us. Verse 1, he's pictured as the vine dresser. And in the winter, the vine dresser would do what we've already looked at. He would cut off the dry, withered, dead branches. Jesus has already said that. But there's something else the vine dresser did. They pruned the living branches. Why? For more fruit. For more abundance. For more life. Pruning is about producing fruit. A vine dresser would remove all the useless growths in order to produce abundant fruit. They would even cut back the healthy branches so regrowth could be all the more stronger and all the more fruitful. And here's what Jesus says, you know, that is exactly how God works in your life too. And the harder the pruning, when an expert dresser does it at the right time, the greater the fragrance, the fruit, and the beauty that will be released later. And that's exactly what the Father does for those that he loves. See verse 2. Every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it may bear more fruit. This means one thing you can expect, which is as a follower of Jesus, you can expect fruit in the most unexpected of places. I didn't get to go to Cornwall this summer, which for various different reasons, and I love it. It's kind of like an anchor point of the year for me. And one of the things I love to do every year in Cornwall, because of the time that we go down, always the last 2 weeks in August, we pick blackberries. We go for walks on the cliffs. We pick blackberries, and I absolutely love it. Come back with sticky fingers, and it's just wonderful. And I was just thinking, God, I didn't get to do that this year. I was out for a walk with our two youngest, just around the streets, around near us. And they were going on, and I said, kids, look. And from behind a massive rickety wooden fence, full disclosure, by some bins, but high enough not to touch the bins, and not to be within other dangerous, low-hanging fruit, dog kind of areas. The fruit was high enough. I said, kids, there's some blackberries. Should we do it? And Henry was like, Dad, I think they're from someone's garden. I said, they're over pavement, it's fine. I think that is fine. And we picked a handful of blackberries. Do you know what? This isn't just me being romantic. They were the best blackberries I've eaten. Even better than the Cornish ones. And I said to the kids, who would have thought that on a walk around the block by a sweaty bin, we would have found the sweetest fruit? Don't let me trivialise pruning for a moment through hard times. But if there is a Father who loves you, who by His Spirit has connected you with His Son, and if the life of Jesus is now flowing through us, and He is committed to producing fruit, He will use any and every circumstance so that your eternal joy may grow and grow and grow. A right of view life. Unexpected fruit. Glorious. Let me finish briefly with this. How do you get hold of it? Here's how. In verse 13, Jesus says the truest test of love is laying down your life for a friend. You know, He's not talking hypothetically. Jesus is about to do exactly this. This is just before the cross. Jesus is about to lay down His life for them. Do you understand what He's saying? Jesus says, I'm calling you to give your life for others in love because I am about to give my life in love for you. Jesus calls us to do this. Our fruit comes only because the true vine was struck down first. Do you remember that description of the vine that I read? The vine lives to give its lifeblood. Its flower is small, its fruit abundant. And when that fruit is mature and the vine has become for a moment glorious, the treasure of the grapes is torn down and the vine is cut right back to the stem. On the cross, Jesus would literally give His lifeblood for us. The sin that means we could not draw near to Him. We were too far away even to come close. We have no right to share His life. We have no right to be connected to Him. And yet, Jesus is willing to go to the cross and deal with our sin and join us to Himself. And He now gives us new life and a new source from which we live. He dies so that we might have His life. The true vine is cut off so we can be joined in. He gives everything, so we can know every good thing. Do you know how deep that promise is? How profound? You're not promised just to kind of know God from a distance here. You're promised an intimate relationship with God Himself. Jesus connects us with the life of God through the Spirit. He will actually come and dwell in us. That's what He said the chapter before, chapter 14 and verse 20. In that day you will know that I am in my Father, listen to this, and you in me, and I in you. He says you're no longer at a distance. Verse 14 and 15, you are intimates. You are my friends. I dwell with you, I live with you. So His death on the cross for us shows us how committed He is to us. To be a friend of Jesus is truly a marvelous thing. So what does it mean for you? Maybe you don't have the life of Jesus. Maybe you don't know Him yet. If that's you, then you need to come to Him for the first time. He says you cannot bear fruit. You will not know this completeness of joy without Him. You cannot imitate a Christian life to produce the fruit of Jesus. It doesn't work. need his life pulsing in you. It's the only way to get fruit. It's the only way to truly flourish. The only way to know the fullness of joy. Do you know how you get it? You can't ask him. Today, ask him. Now, ask him. Say, Jesus, this is the life I need. I want to come to you. I need this. Show me what it means to come to you and receive life. And as a Christian, how do you keep on bearing fruit? We stay in the stream of his love. We continue, he says, verses 9 and 10, to abide in his love. One of the things that abiding means, it means just staying in that place. It means as a Christian, you say, I'm going to put down roots. Jesus, this is where I stay, and I don't want to move anywhere else. And as we do that, we can know the Spirit producing, verse 5, much fruit. He wants us to be fruitful. Because it turns out the secret to a fruitful life is no secret at all. It's remaining in Jesus. That's what it is. It turns out that growth is not a mystery. It's remaining in Jesus. It turns out that the engine for all of this is no mystery at all. It is remaining in Jesus. But to do that, to keep growing as a church, to keep growing as individuals, we're going to need the help of each other. Think about the image. It's a corporate image, isn't it? It's a corporate image. We are one branch amongst many that all flow from the vine. We are individuals who are part of something bigger. You're going to need other Christians to help keep you focused on Jesus. To pray with us, to help us stay in the Word. Jesus connects his Word with abiding in him. We don't have time to look into it now. But he says his Word cleanses, verse 3, and then dwells within his followers, verse 7. The Holy Spirit uses that Word. You need others to help you dive into that Word, discover that Word, apply that Word to your life. We also need others to encourage us as God brings us. It can be painful. We need others who can walk with us and encourage us to say, this is where I see God working in your life right now. Do you not see that? I see it. This is what he's doing. Let me encourage you. These things that we can so easily miss. So really practical to close. Are you part of a church that can help you do that? Do you belong to a church that can help you with that? If not, can Redeemer be that church? If not, can I encourage you with the most welcoming heart I possibly can to go find somewhere that can be soon and commit to it. And if you're part of Redeemer, then find others to help you do this. Why not speak to Alex? Join one of the city groups that you spoke about earlier. Smaller groups around the city, ways to make connections and share life with each other on the way. And then if you're part of one of those within city groups, have 3 or 4 other Christians, man with man, women with women, we have DNA groups. Who are a group of Christians who can really get to know you better. Help discover, share what their challenges are, what your challenges are. To really help discover what God says to you, help to nurture you, push you to action, to really walk alongside you. We want to produce fruit as a church. We want to grow as a church. But without connection to Jesus,